I am so excited about this conversation. Today's guest is Lauren Taus. Lauren is a licensed clinical therapist, a yoga teacher, and a very public advocate for psychedelic medicine. She has an amazing Instagram that is filled with information on the psychedelic space. And with that diverse background, Lauren brings a very unique perspective to our conversation around emotional well-being, personal growth, and this intersection of ancient and modern science. In today's episode, we dive deep into the power of psychedelics and how they can facilitate emotional breakthroughs and healing that traditional therapy may not offer. We get into Lauren's own journey to her current work and how that has expanded from yoga to therapy to now working with these psychedelic substances and helping others integrate their experiences. Through this conversation, you will gain insight into the limitations of traditional talk therapy and the importance of embodied somatic therapy. Acknowledging this mind, body, spirit connection, we explore the ideas of integrating and feeling emotions, even the difficult ones, and you will learn all about how psychedelics are used to facilitate a deeper level of healing. We'll learn about Lauren's favorite drugs. We'll learn about my favorite drugs. We're going to talk about drugs. This is a really exciting episode. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it. I saw you, Lauren, for a bit as a person in need of help. Hopefully I'm allowed to say that. If not, we'll cut it. And you really, in ways that I think I had mentioned to you the last time we spoke, but I'm excited to touch on more now, changed my life in a really, really huge way. So I am really excited. We're going to get to jam on all things your life, psychedelics, therapy. But one thing we like to ask, considering this podcast is called Been There, Felt That, is how are you today, in this moment, in life? How are you?
Thanks for asking, and thanks for being you. It's such an honor and privilege to be in support of the human spirit. And for me, I do look at it that way. And spirituality really begins with anything that's bigger than you. When in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the seeming apex is self-realization. I would go a step further and say it's self-transcendence. But you need a self to transcend self. And so many of us are so disconnected from self that it's real hard to get there. And it is the homecoming journey. It is the work that I effort to offer and that I effort to do myself. So in terms of how am I today, I am, just off my morning rituals and practices. And I really believe that we are what we practice, and we are all in devotion to something. I have learned to be in devotion to presence, and it's a practice, right? I think we're sort of culturally allergic to presence. I'm guilty of that as well. And, in my meditation, and thanks to psychedelics, I can sit well. And I can sit in such a way that I look forward to it. And that if I don't do it, and it's real seldom that I don't, I can feel it. And in my meditations, I often have psychedelic experiences. And I can trip hard on my own breath and on my own being and on life that I'm part of. And in my practice this morning, I was just holding a lot of life. I was getting texts from clients who are feeling pretty dysregulated, and learning to keep my own boundaries is essential for quality care. And also not feeling, right? Like I do feel, and I never want my heart not to break. So there's all this kind of incoming towards me, and both holding it and letting it go at the same time. And I also had a really lovely date last night, just to share.
Okay, all right.
Oh, she's single. And in the date,
public service announcement, ladies and gentlemen.
in the day, this man is a brilliant man. And in our dialogue, there was ways of challenging and provoking inside of me how I'm doing what I'm doing. And, I'm aware that we grow in our edges. We want to breathe there, not eat there, not, engage in some sort of addictive practice there. And I was just feeling gratitude to be challenged, gratitude to be thinking outside of the ways in which I typically think. And so grateful for him and grateful for, what it is that gets ignited inside of me in generative conversations that then have a life beyond them. So I'm good. I'm feeling alive.
I don't know that anyone's had that deep of an answer yet when asked how they're doing. So I really appreciate the honesty and just like you speak with so much. There's so much like poetry and beautiful language in the way you speak, and I want to get to that in a second. So one thing I'm so curious about, because we're friends on Instagram, and I watch or at least part of your morning ritual often when I'm scrolling through your Instagram stories. And I'm like, fuck, this is like a next level routine. What are you doing? Like, just give me a sense of what is your morning ritual?
Mm-hmm. Aaron, you can't stay clean on yesterday's shower. You can't.
Okay.
You got to clean up. You got to clean up. It's a daily practice. So for me, there's a lot of different pieces that I bring in, and it shifts and changes, but there are certain key components. And for me, I really like to move my body every day. And that can be as simple as a walk. I'm definitely a yoga girl. That was my first drug and my first foray into wholeness and spirituality and all of it. So before I'm, setting up my screen to share with the world my practice, which by the way is a bit of a weird thing to do. And I am in inquiry around that and simultaneously aware that it seems to inspire others into their own sort of practice. And so I do it and I offer it and I sit with the kind of question of, is this really a good thing to do? And when I sit with my toolkit, which includes poetry books and fire, candles, sage, rapé, of course, prayer and song. And I usually read a couple different poems to inspire me, to evoke and provoke whatever is alive inside. And then I often will light a candle and kind of do a little fire gazing, like look at the fire and be reminded of the work that is required for transformation. And shedding, right? The snake skin shedding. May we die as many times as is necessary to live this one sacred, precious life. Good living requires a lot of dying.
Wow.
And you got to be willing to put yourself in the fire.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again? That's so good.
Yeah, sure. Which part?
The part about you must die. You must be willing to die.
Yeah. Good living requires a lot of dying.
Good living requires a lot of dying. Holy shit. I mean, that's, whew. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
And, I also say that, everybody wants to go to heaven. Nobody wants to die to get there.
Right.
And the goal in life is not to rid ourselves of fear, but to be courageous and brave. The hero and the coward feel the same. The difference is action. And so I honor the fear that runs us. We don't get to be done with it. People will say, I want to be fearless. No. I want you to be brave, sweetheart. Right. And I say that to myself too. I want to be brave in widening my own window of tolerance to experience this outrageous gift called life. And again, that does involve, you liked it, the dying part, right? We have to be willing to let go again and again and again. And so I look at the fire as a reminder of that, that process. I also like to light sage or Palo Santo just to kind of create more of a sensory experience. So many spiritual practices are about abdication and asceticism. For me, spirituality is how much can I be in the vessel? Like how deeply can I inhabit this temple in a good way, in a loving way, and recognize that it is part of it all. So activating my senses in all the different ways that I can. I pray. I pray Hebrew prayers. And I also pray my own prayers.
Shout out.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I pray modalities, which basically is a prayer that says thank you. And I stand before my highest self. May I have the courage and faithfulness to like act in that way. And I say the Shema, which to me is a prayer of oneness, and to appreciate that we are all, irrespective of what God you pray to, if you pray to God at all, part of it, right? And then outside of that, my 3 favorite prayers are thank you, help, and oh my God. Oh my God as in awe and wonder. Yep. I love to pray for my loved ones. I pray for the people that I struggle with. I pray. I have, I call the angels in. The angels to me are, my deceased mother, my sister, other loved ones who have transitioned out of their bodies. I call on support from them. And
that's beautiful.
Yeah. And then I often work with hape, which is a ceremonial tobacco that you inhale through your nose. And it feels like a wasabi is going up through my brain and landing me straight in the center of my own heart and being. And that often really opens up a lot of emotion for me.
Wow.
And then I just sit with what is. And I also, because you asked, I like to invite sound. I've been talking about senses in the body, and sound can also be a really good way to invite more emotion. And
do you make a playlist? Are you playing singing bowls, gongs, shruti box? What are we working with?
I have my favorites, my top 40 for meditation sound. Okay. I know it's like a Garth Stevenson, East Forest, cello mano, that kind of a vibe.
Got it. Okay.
Change it up from time to time. And I sing. I like to sing.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much I want to unpack with you. You are one of the more fascinating people in my ether these days. And I think there's a lot of reasons why, but psychedelics is obviously having this renaissance. You're obviously a very public facing advocate for the space. You're somebody that I've obviously worked with. You inspired a lot of my work with honestly, all of my work with psychedelics. And we'll get to that. But I want to go back a little bit, because part of what I like to do on this podcast is, I like taking teachers off of the pedestal.
Thank you.
And I think it's been a historical problem for me in therapy or in this space is there is this expectation that I think we develop with, people on social media or people who, even our therapists who we see every week, that sort of is, oh my God, this person is perfect in my eyes, or they can do no wrong, or they've got all their shit figured out, or whatever it is. And I really like to take the white coat off of the space. And I really like us to get into a space where we understand that we are also humans on this journey, and something prompted you to get to where you got to. And so where I'm going here is, like, if you and I sat down to chat 6 years ago, I would have been like, what? I would have been like, I don't know what to say in this moment, because you're so in touch and you've got such language for spirit. And in my early days, I used to be like, spirituality and higher consciousness. And I was like, oh, this is all too woo-woo for me, until I started to tap into what it actually was. And I cannot imagine you came out of the womb like this either. And so I would love you to take us to your relationship moment, the moment or the relationship in your life that really changed things for you. And as much as you're willing to share and how that sort of has landed you where you are now, I'd love to hear.
I just want to say, in response to what you just shared, that the only seat that makes any sense to me is a humble one. And I think that this guru culture needs to be dismantled. I also am aware that we are generally bereft of mentors, and we need elders that are wisdom carriers to be able to support us as we go through this whole thing, right? In a sort of post-religious world, we don't really have a lot of rituals or rites of passage to mark our lives and to support the meaning making. And I want more of that. And I also, as an educator, as a teacher, as a clinician, I am always going to defer to the authority of the individual and effort to just turn on their own inner healing intelligence, because we all have it. And I'm not doing anything, right? I'm clearing the way for the person to be in deeper levels of listening to themselves.
I love that.
So I just wanted to kind of name that. And sure, yeah, my journey was not, and I did not start here. It certainly did not start here. When people ask me how I got into this work, the short answer is my own suffering. And
as it often is.
How can it not be? And, my suffering has been my greatest teacher. And still I bow my head to it. And it's not like it leaves. It comes in and out and with different curriculum. And I can't identify one relationship as being the one that turned it all on. It's been a series of relationships. As I mentioned earlier, yoga was my first drug, and I came to it as a literally starving teenager. I was very anorexic. I was very not okay. And so my first yoga teachers were real catalysts for me to start to befriend myself. And when I look at the world and the violence that is waging everywhere, I'm aware that there's violence in the individual bodies that are perpetrating harm. So I was doing that, but it was mostly just in the field of my own self-violence. And, next I was in a 12-step fellowship for, again, my eating disorder. And my first sponsor was a massive teacher. And this is a woman, I could not have worked with anyone like myself. So I worked with a woman 50 years my senior, a different religion, Black woman from the South, had lots of addictions and lots of recovery. And she loved me and taught me slowly how to start loving myself. And she said to me, she reflected back to me, I'll never forget. She said, Lauren, I've never seen this degree of self-hatred. And yeah, it's wild for me to think about that dead part of me, right? Because I'm not that girl anymore. That part of me that was in so much struggle and war, right?
Right.
So that was a big one. And then, my parents, for all of the, excuse my language, but the fuckery and the pain and the love. And, my brother who brought me to my first psychedelic experience. And, then all of my teachers along the way who have taught me how to work with psychoactive things and who have also held space for me while I journey deeper into my own being and what I'm part of, right? We're all Russian dolls. We are all comprised of our ancestors. I think Gabor Mate recently said 95%, and I don't know that you can really put a number on it, but 95% of the trauma that any one of us carry is actually not ours.
I love that. The Russian doll thing, that image is so good. Mm-hmm. Did he say that? So Gabor Mate? No.
I think that's a Lauren thing. I think that's Lauren
amazing.
Thing. Yeah,
it's
a
great
good one.
visual. You've had all these significant moments, which I really, by the way, appreciate you sharing. And, you obviously struggled with your self-image and your body and found yoga. And yoga teaches a lot of these principles, right? I mean, yoga teaches a lot of the spiritual side to life. And then, our families, which, I love that you said fuckery, because I say this often, and maybe on every show we've done, this has come up, because our family of origin, our origin stories, our wounds, they are the foundation for the rest of the work of our life. Oftentimes, were your parents this spiritual? Did they think, oh boy, Lauren's really going for it? Or did you grow up around this kind of energy?
I think my mom had a deep deep, unexpressed spirituality. And my mom passed away 8 years ago. She had pancreatic cancer. And my mom was also very much a complex PTSD case who had a lot of expensive treatment that re-traumatized her. And I know with every fiber of my being, and so does my dad, who's a medical doctor, know that she would have lived longer with access to specifically MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. And it's part of what galvanizes my work is my mom. I'm working for her. And I'm working for all the moms and dads out there who are in pain and trying to get help and haven't been able to get effective help yet. I'm also working for all the kids of those parents and for all of us. And I do believe, though, to your question, that my mother had a deep, deep, deep level of spirituality. My dad, on the other hand, definitely did not. My dad was a fierce atheist for the vast majority of his life. And I think carried quite a lot of fear around death and dying. My mother did not. And I am very, very proud of converting my father to psychedelic experiencing at the age of 75. He's now 78, will be 79 in June.
It's amazing.
And my dad is a spiritual man now.
That's beautiful. And I am also, just by way of Instagram stalking, which is, very 2023, I am also totally in awe of your relationship and your journey. And I'm sure we'll get more into that. I want to thank you for sharing your story. And I think it's really important to know that we don't just come out of the womb like this. This takes an immense amount of work, and it's constant. And I loved what you said about fear, because the fear does not stop. You just figure out how to invite it in, which I think is the key. I was raised by a mom who scared the shit out of me around drugs. Okay, so I remember her telling me stories of ending up in the UCLA psych ward from smoking laced weed. And it's been a bit of a blessing and a curse. It instilled a deep amount of fear in me. And she, by the way, I have the greatest, most loving mother ever. And it just goes to show your parents can still fuck you up.
They're going to fuck you up.
They're going to fuck you up.
I've never met a client, myself included, that doesn't have mommy daddy issues. It's part and parcel for the course of being human.
Totally. And so I never touched anything except for weed, and had a really bad experience, and was basically scared off of drugs for my entire life, until I tried mushrooms for the very first time. And it was in a really safe space, and it was a very little amount. And I really had to breathe into some fear. And I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. This is actually pretty good. I didn't look at my phone for 6 hours. I was just present with my friends. That felt weird. I feel like most people, are somewhere in my, I would say, roughly in my line of sight, which is okay, I've either had some limited exposure to drugs, or I'm just hearing about psychedelics for the first time and I'm really curious, or I'm really scared of this, but it intrigues me. How do you even start to unpack this space? How do you start to figure out what this space is even for and what these medicines are for? Can you give us a primer on the psychedelic space and how people should be approaching it?
I'll try to keep it short.
It's a big question.
It is a big question. Let's start with the word psychedelic. It's a word that is comprised of psyche and delune. It really just means mind expansion. It was a term coined in 1956 in a conversation between psychiatrist Humphrey Osmond, and Humphrey Osmond actually tripped Bill Wilson, the founder of AA, well after the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think that's a little known fact that needs to be better known. So Humphrey Osmond and Aldous Huxley coined this term, and they were efforting to clear the psychotomimetic term, which is basically a scarier term. It's replicating psychosis. So this is mind expansion territory. This is the landscape of expanding your mind. Now, I hold that good psychotherapy should be psychedelic. Good psychotherapy should support a person in widening the aperture so that they can see more.
Whether there are medicines or not, you're saying. Yeah.
Correct. No medicine. Good psychotherapy should be psychedelic.
Right.
And if it's not, it's actually not working. Okay. So psychedelics are are that. It's mind expansion. Life is mind expanding. It's not actually a drug that does it. The drug can catalyze. And I think it's really important for people to just anchor in the history of, Nixon era, the war on drugs, 1971 drug scheduling, no science. There's literally no science. We have no problem selling people cigarettes and alcohol, which have much higher harm, to the body, which, the neurotoxicity, the pain that gets created and the disease that gets created from these substances that we sell without problem. And then these other substances, which have been scheduled again without any scientific backing and have been, Schedule 1, which means no medical indication, highly addictive and just not useful. I believe that the Schedule 1 drugs are some of the most effective interventions for disrupting some of the stickiest pathological processes that we experience as humans. And what's also important historically to name and know is that human beings have been working with psychoactive substances since probably the moment we got here. And there's, good reason to believe that psilocybin was really developmental and supportive in language. And
right, the stoned ape theory, right? Is that?
That's right. That's exactly right. And Brian Marescu's book, The Immortality Key, which posits that psychoactive substances may have indeed informed and inspired the Western religions. And there are passages in the Rig Vedas. There's so many references in ancient history. I mean, there's Paleolithic psychonauts. There's sketchings on that are 30, 40,000 years old in caves. So there's actually nothing new here. What's new-ish is all the stigma that we carry. And I believe that we should be, specific and careful and caring in our engagement with these kinds of tools and partner allies. And, I'm not cavalier about it, but we're already doing that. We've been doing that and we're still doing that. So there, again, tobacco and alcohol and also all the prescription drugs, they're drugs. We're taking drugs.
Totally.
Have you ever had a prescription coffee, chocolate, drugs?
I mean, you were naming cigarettes and alcohol. Yeah. I'm thinking alcohol, Xanax, and look, some of these things have been, they've been incredibly helpful for certain people. And I'm not here to poo poo any of that, but, I think, my job as somebody who is trying to, and we share this, but who's trying to create more access for people when it comes to their mental health means also helping them to see what's available. And,
totally.
And so, sorry to cut you off.
I think that people engage in any sort of psychoactive substance for either departure or connection. And I also believe as a therapist that psychotropic medications have their space and place and that we shouldn't have shame or stigma around that either. I do have a problem with someone being, just prescribed and prescribed and prescribed and prescribed ad nauseum forever and ever without having conversation, without having exploration. And unfortunately, that's pretty normative. So I know from my own personal experience in this body and from my own practice and my own research and my own trainings that psychedelic substances partnered in a good way can really disrupt and interrupt and support deeper levels of alignment and health and aliveness in people when everything else hasn't worked. But it requires a lot of good care.
Totally. Which sort of brings me to my next question. So, there's obviously the recreational use of a lot of these supplements, we'll call them, or drugs. I mean, I don't know. Is calling them drugs inherently bad? Does that perpetuate the stigma?
I think it depends on who you ask. I like to use the word drugs because I think it needs reclamation and cleanup.
Okay.
In the dictionary, drugs and medicine are synonymous.
Yeah.
So
right.
They're the same word.
Totally.
And I think it's okay to use the word, we go to a drugstore. It's not a bad thing, right?
Right. Well, depends who you ask, but yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. So there are a range of drugs that are now becoming these Schedule 1 drugs that are now coming into popular culture, and people take them recreationally, and people also are now using them very intentionally for healing. And for me, there was no way that I could do any healing with these things until I just experienced what they felt like. And by the way, I have recently had an experience with ketamine, which we'll talk about, which was not a great experience for me. And in part because like, I didn't feel like I knew the drug. I didn't feel like I was friends with it yet. And so I spent this hour trying to get to know it in a very awkward way. It's almost like having sex and then getting to know each other. You know, it's like, is the best way I could describe it. So for somebody listening who's like, yeah, you know, okay, Lauren, I see you. I hear you. I've been following you. I'm interested. Obviously, a lot of this shit's underground right now. So like, how do you make recommendations to people around how to experience it, how to do it safely in this environment where it is still technically illegal? And where do you start with those recommendations?
The gravity of the laws falls heavy on my body. It's, you know, the war on drugs has caused unfathomable harm, specifically to communities of color. And the war on drugs has always been a war on people of color. And so it's just a part of the conversation that I can't not name.
Yeah.
And when we're operating in a field that is unethical in terms of the laws, like the laws are not ethical. And so I like to kind of praise civil disobedience, breaking the law because it's the right thing to do, right? Like, thank you, Oscar Schindler. Thank you, Gandhi. Thank you, Rosa Parks. Thank you. And I believe that education is for everybody. And so I effort to provide that and to, you know, create more of it. Everybody deserves the education. I don't think that everybody needs to trip on a drug. I don't. I think a lot of people could really benefit, and more so that are probably engaging in this kind of work at this time. And in the climate and the atmosphere that we're currently in, again, one of the greatest tools is education. And in that, you know, complex is also, if you're going to be doing drugs, test them, right? Because in a marketplace such as the one that we're in, and there is a giant marketplace for drugs, they're unregulated. And so there's often cross-contamination and safety first, right? So I'm going to want to make sure that people are safe. And like, you know, there's tests that you can get, Dance Safe, Bonk Police, like, can you sell testing kits? I think it'd be amazing for drug testing to be way easier than it is. And you know, it takes a little bit of work, you know, obviously carrying Narcan, things like that. And in certain environments, because all these things are getting laced with other things that you don't think that are there. And then, you know, I would like to work towards a time where people have really honest, authentic, loving relationships, and where people can sit with their loved ones in a good way, right? Or where they can trip together. Now, because these things are unpredictable, right? The psychedelic drugs are going to be different, unique experiences for every person every time.
Yeah.
Mixed can of worms. We don't know what's going to come, and it could be a total joyride, and it could be very, very scary, right? So that's also where, again, education, setting dose. And I also like to talk about the matrix, right? Like, what is your intention? Are you leaving? Are you connecting? What are you doing this for? So I would invite people to be in that inquiry.
When you say the matrix, you mean like the matrix we're living in?
I'll get there. I'm going to kind of spell.
Okay. Got it. Sorry. Keep going.
No. Thank you. You're like that was a buzz term, right? So the set, like, here's your mindset, your mood, what your why, the setting, right? So personally, I advocate for closed containers. You know, like in a home, in nature. You know, not particularly jazzed about festivals, right? Or big parties. Now I know that people are going to do that. And so it's really important to just have maybe someone that knows that you're doing this, that you can check in with if something goes a little south, that you've got care around. And for some people in a festival, like they have really divine experiences of communion and connection with music and like, yes, bless. And it's just a little bit trickier. It could get a little bit messier if the environment is less controlled. Dose, of course, how much of the thing are you taking? And again, these are all pieces that a person can learn about. And always start slow, start less. You can always add more. You can't take it back.
True that.
And then the matrix. And the matrix is a term coined by a psychologist named Betty Eisner in the 50s. And she included that in setting and dose as the fourth component that really needs to be tended to. Now, the matrix is the system in which an individual is embedded. So what support do they have? And as a therapist, I want to make sure that my clients have support that's bigger than me. Right? Like when they go home, how will their experiences be met and supported for the translation that is, the outcome we're seeking? And, the matrix is, of course, like, there's a meta way in which we can look at that.
Right.
And, I said, I think before we even started recording that, we're living in a pretty sick matrix. And I love Krishnamurti's quote, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So if a person is presenting with symptoms and struggling, it may be a sign of their health. Like, this isn't working. So the matrix really needs attention, both within our individual lives and our collective life. So
to summarize for everybody,
please.
And then I want to get into like what drugs you're excited about and why.
Okay.
Yeah, right. For sure. But to summarize, so you're saying, there's sort of this 4-part matrix, and then there's actually a matrix, and then there's the matrix of the matrix, but you have mindset or intention. You've got setting, where you are, your preference for a closed container, which I totally agree with. Dose, low and slow. I have been the victim of taking too much too soon. It ended up being an amazing learning experience, which all of these things have been. We can get to that. And then I love this, the greater system that we are a part of, and who is there to help us integrate and to hold space and to be on the journey. Super helpful.
And ultimately, Aaron, I feel it was once upon a time on an acid trip with my dad where I was thinking about how weird it is to be a therapist and how weird it is that I'm busy and that my colleagues are busy and that people in our culture have to pay to be seen and heard and helped.
Yeah.
Like, weird. I would like to work towards a world where we can just help each other.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think that's a big, obviously both of us are in this space, right? Like we're looking at, okay, how do you scale some maybe more practical life advice and sort of navigating big life moments and relationships with our company Felt. And you're obviously doing this in a more clinical one-to-one, even one-to-few setting. I totally agree. It seems crazy that, that like we don't have just access to this stuff in a way that's accessible and affordable. And instead, and look, I realize that this is the way the system is set up, and the system is inherently very flawed, but that, I have friends who are like, I could pay rent or I could go to therapy. Like the fact that we have to decide between those two things is really gnarly. And I think there is something to the psychedelic space that lends itself to being, in a way, every man or every person. nobody controls a mushroom, right? There's no big pharma for mushrooms.
They're trying.
Yeah. I think part of what inspired me so much about our work together was I had reached this point where I felt like I have been, I'm Jewish. I came out of the womb. The doctor was like, "Hey, how was that for you?" I was like, "Okay, calm down. I don't even resent my mom yet." Like, it's just like we're immediately thrown into therapy as Jews. And I got to this place where I was just like, you know what? I have talked as much as I can possibly talk. I have intellectualized as much as I can possibly intellectualize. And I actually just told this story on another podcast, and it was about you. I didn't say your name, but I had said one of my biggest moments in recent years has been sitting in a session with you, and we were on Zoom, and I was looking up and talking, and you said, "Aaron, I can't help but notice that you keep looking up." And I was like, "Yeah." And she's and you were like, "What are you doing when you're looking up?" And I was like, "I don't know. I guess I'm thinking." And you're like, "Right. I want you to feel more and think less." And that inspired me so much that we literally changed our company name from Mind, which was a thinking company, to Felt, which was a feeling company, because it resonated so deeply that we are in a society that is so good at intellectualizing, but so bad at integrating and feeling. And one of the things that psychedelics have opened up for me is a capacity to feel like I have never, ever had before. And I would love you to talk a little bit about how far one can go in maybe traditional talk therapy, and maybe where some of the limitations are that psychedelics are helping people to access.
As I mentioned, good psychotherapy should be psychedelic.
And it was.
Good. And and there are some really potent interventions that I think can really anchor people more deeply in the felt sense without medicine.
Yep.
I would say the vast majority of psychotherapy is cognitive, is cerebral. You don't think feelings. Like feelings, energy and motion. It's in the body. That's why my practice is called Embodied. And it was a journey that I had to take to make this vessel a home. And I absolutely know that the mind is a great ally and partner. We don't want to make it an enemy. It can hijack the system and often does. And the work of integration, mind, body, spirit, is work. Heart, so is work. So I believe from my own experience and from the work that I do with clients that when a person is ready and they have cultivated enough inner resourcing to ride the tides inside, to be good cosmic surfers, when I'm aware that an individual has at the back end a system of support that can proverbially hold them, then psychoactive substances are going to, open Pandora's box and allow for a person to have way more access to what's actually going on inside. And that is a stunning gift. I have one client who said, and she's done exquisite healing work with me. And she said, ketamine helped her to identify that there were doors inside that were so tightly closed, I didn't even know they were there, she said. And through the therapy, I was able to unlock them and choose. I was able to choose life. I was able to choose myself. And she chose. So there's so much inside of us that is skillfully and intellectually armored. And when we can take the default mode network offline, when we can take our mind police and let them kind of park their cars and take a nap, we have so much more information, which is again going to be like sentient, felt information. And you got to feel it to heal it. Life is a body-based experience, not a cognitive exercise. And, you know, we have to hold it before we let it go. We have to like go through these oceans inside, swim out in order to come back to land. And, you know, I think people want to be happy, right? And happiness is wonderful. I consider myself a pretty happy person. And happiness, isn't a destination. It's a place where we pass through here and again. And it's entirely contingent on our ability to play the rest of the emotional keyboard. So that means feeling sad, feeling scared, feeling mad, and being able to like hold that and express that and let that move through the body. I haven't met an intervention that has allowed me to go as deeply as the psychedelic interventions.
Yeah.
And I will say that the way I like to work with them and advocate for them to be worked with in the name of healing and wholeness and therapy is relational. So I'm not going to ever give somebody medicine unless I know them well.
Right.
Unless they know me well. Like that relationship, like we hurt and heal in relationship, allows for a person to like feel safe enough to go there.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many factors, I think, in, you know, these journeys being set up for success. And success does not always mean, to your earlier point, like a whoa, that was far out, dude. You know, like I have had some really gnarly journeys. But one thing that, you know, you said that is so important is you have to feel it to heal it. And I think again, going back to our society, we have a lot of dopamine and a lot of drugs and a lot of ways we like to distract ourselves. And, you know, we hear time heals everything. And I think a lot of time we think, all right, well, if I just kind of distract myself enough and, you know, fuck about with like nonsense that actually just removes me from my inner self, eventually this will go away. But there was something I learned. I was not a good student in college, but this was one of the things I learned in my liberal arts classes. Were my psychology teacher, who's amazing, said this thing about Freud, which was that, you know, Freud said that everybody had soldiers and that you had this army of soldiers. And at moments in your life where you encountered stuff you didn't want to deal with, you would send out a soldier to go fight the battle for you. And eventually you got to an age where you're like, okay, cool. Like, here's another thing I'm going to send a soldier out for. And you're like, hey guys, anybody? And you realize in that moment, all of your soldiers are out on the battlefield and you don't have any more to give. And you got to start going back and picking them up one by one by one. And that is what a lot of this work forces you, whether you like it or not, forces you to do. And so, yeah, I could not agree more. If you really want to feel, and you really have to in order to heal, I mean, what a beautiful catalyst to that.
I had a client who said to me pretty recently, you know, like, I don't want to revisit the past. I'm done with it. And also aware that there's a lot of catastrophizing energy, a lot of fear energy. And it says, you know, I feel like I'm pretty good in the present. I'm like, I'm not so sure. You know, there's like your past is hijacking your capacity to presence and you're projecting it all over your future. Like we actually do need to go back to the past a little bit. Like I don't want to hang out there and spend our whole lives there. Right. But like we need to go back sometimes and reconstitute ourselves at sites of injury. Totally. And not just soldier it, right? Yes. And defend it and protect it. And, you know, like we got to go there. And the defense and the protection, again, is so skillful. It's so intelligent. It's like, thank you so much. And let's create enough safety. And the drugs really help with that. So that we can go there and like look and see and feel and then let go and forgive or rage and then forgive whatever needs to happen, right? So that we can stop making the present this thing that's not happening because it's not. Yeah. And that requires like picking up those soldiers and going back to those spaces and places inside where we splinter, shut off, shut down, check out, and pick ourselves back up, lovingly pick ourselves back up.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many nuggets that I cannot wait for people to hear as you just like casually drop them the way you do. And
by the way, we all have done that. And not only are we going back to our own sites of injury, right? It's like back to the Russian dolls. I'll share from my own experience, I have so much like Jewish trauma that like beautifully presents in psychedelic spaces for me to sit with.
Same homegirl.
Mm-hmm. And, and I also, come from a mother I mentioned who had a lot of PTSD and a lot of sexual abuse. I've not had any sexual abuse in my life. Thank God. Like most, it's astronomical numbers of men and women who have. I have not. And I carry symptoms as if it happened to me in the nervous system, because it's encoded by like my first 9 months in her womb, by all the conditioning that was, just transmitted energetically. We are not just our own experiences. And, let that be comforting on some level. And also, you're not to blame for some of the difficulty. And it's your responsibility to live your life in a good way as best you can. Absolutely.
I mean, this parallels to something I'm also really passionate about, which is functional medicine, and epigenetics, right? And this idea that we have for a long time thought that we were just predestined, that, oh, cancer is just going to get me, or, oh, heart attack's just going to get me, or whatever it is. And there is such a huge body of research that is coming out to suggest that, we like to sort of be ignorant and think that these things just are acts of God, but that we actually have a lot of control over the way that our genes express. And it always struck me that we didn't do the same sort of, ancestral digging in therapy, which was to say like, cool, like tell me about your parents. And some do, right? We go back and some,
I do.
Yeah. Some therapists practice, family systems and want to take a big intake, but it is so a part of our journey and something that we have the ability to change and to better, but it takes knowing it. It takes asking the hard questions. It takes having conversations with our parents and our family that are difficult to have. And I think that is another thing, especially these empathogens allow us, to do. So let's get into something fun. Not that this hasn't all been fun, but what are some of your favorite drugs? And what are some of maybe the drugs that you are really most hopeful and excited about becoming maybe more of a regular part of our healing?
I'm an ayahuasca girl personally. And ayahuasca is not for the faint of heart. It requires tremendous amount of inner resourcing. It is pure life force energy. And that means in all of its terrible, terrific variety, it is exquisite and excruciating. I've literally been murdered and have had full body orgasms and have been absolutely the leader of the giggle gang and have just experienced like lifetimes in 6 hours, many times. And that medicine has been my greatest like teacher for good living and has given me very specific directions. It tells me very directly, like, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. And has allowed me also to just feel, has also reminded me, and I've gotten clear direction, like I said, to make sure that I include levity in the lesson plan of my life. Like to be playful, to have fun.
Play is huge.
And I was not a good playful kid. I had to learn fun later in life. And I love the empathogens. 3-MMC is one of my most favorites. It's very lucid and allows for a person to really witness their experience. And they're just going to immediately drop into heart-centered content and be able to engage with emotional content without being overly emotional about it. Of course, I love MDMA for the way that it really just puts a person right in the center of their own heart and right in their own body and like finally kind of feel. I think that they all have so much potency. I would say those are the ones that I'm most excited about. I love LSD and mescaline and bufo. I'm going to advocate for the synthetic 5-MeO-DMT,
right?
The like deep God experience, right? Like, I've had experiences, I believe, with that medicine that could turn an atheist into a believer in a nanosecond. Like you can't not believe in something after some of these experiences. The joke of it all, like it's looking at us through a frog's eyes. It's right in front of our faces.
Right.
And, it's the San Pedro cactus growing everywhere. It's right here. I'm grateful that I came to drugs later in life. I didn't party in high school or college.
Me too.
And so I didn't I came to it all with reverence and I know how to play with psychoactives too. Like I know how to celebrate with them. And again, it's because I am internally resourced and I know like setting dose and the matrix and I can set up a circumstance that's going to allow me to have a good time with people that I love.
So I can't help but notice 2 drugs that you left off this list. And I wonder if it's intentional or just I'd love to get your thoughts on them. One is mushrooms, which was, probably the thing I've done most and has been the most outside of MDMA. I mean, I haven't really done many of these, to be honest, but, we'll get to MDMA in a second, but yeah, what are your thoughts on mushrooms, psilocybin?
I think psilocybin is beautiful. Mushrooms are composters and connectors. I love them. I'm an advocate for sure of like beautiful microdosing. That's been kind of my big engagement with that particular medicine. I've had bigger mushroom experiences and they're so potent and so powerful and so healing for so many different things. And they're not, my go-to. They're not my particular ally plant. It's all relationship. I remember in an ayahuasca trip, I wanted to make ayahuasca a guru. And to our earlier conversation about like no gurus, ayahuasca said, no, don't do that to me. I sit in circle with the others. You can choose me. You can prefer me, but I'm not doing that with you.
Right.
And so bless the mushroom and how widely it grows and how much it knows. And I love it. And it's just not my main squeeze.
Okay. So let's talk about what you've made a name for yourself as your main squeeze is that you also left off this list, which I, by the way, I could totally cut this part of the episode, but if it's something, so
I'm happy to talk about ketamine. So again, the question as I understood it was, what are your favorites?
Yes.
And what are you most excited about?
Yes.
So ketamine is not my personal favorite. Okay. It's not. I've tripped many times. I've gone to inner outer space a lot with ketamine. And ketamine is a beautiful, beautiful medicine. And I have worked with it with a number of people who have literally come back from the dead. Right. And I said life requires good dying, and a lot of people are living dead. Yeah. Right. So they're not actually dying, they're dead. I want them to die and come back. Right. And I've seen people like awaken again. Yeah. I've seen people move from suicidal despair into thrive in partnership with this medicine and with right relationship in the therapeutic dynamic. When everything is legal, and I like to imagine that time as closer rather than farther in the horizon, I will still choose ketamine for many things. Yeah. As somebody who has a history of being rather dissociative and being in a role of power with my body rather than partnership, I prefer medicines that are going to give me a more somatic experience than ketamine. And in many ways, back to the laws, I effort to be somewhat agnostic as a provider and a clinician, because it's what we do with the experience that matters. And there are people, and I just treated someone yesterday who had a very somatic experience. I'm not one of those people. Like, I'm gonna like lay there rather comatose in my transformational space, otherwise known as the K-hole, and like trip. And it's not, for me, it hasn't been as generative as barfing my brains out, shaking and crying and screaming and singing, or, having a really delicious and pathogen moment with a loved one.
Right. Right. I love that you clarified and shared that. And it's funny hearing you say about like the somatic piece of it, because I also have had notoriously a bad relationship with my body. And that's been through a lot of health anxiety as, someone growing up with an autoimmune disease that didn't present itself until later in life. There was a lot of distrust of my body. And it's funny hearing you put voice to what I have felt inherently from doing these different medicines, is that I also tend towards the things that put me into a more embodied, somatic state. And so I feel you on that.
And I'll say too, that for so many people with ketamine, the real timeout, the real departure from body can and often does translate into a softening into the return of embodiment. Right? To like take a time out from it and then be like, oh, I actually like it here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's all with these medicines, it's all so individualized.
Totally.
And we've talked about scale. Like there's no one size fits all treatment plan, no one size fits all protocol. The work is designed and should be intimate. So it makes it difficult to scale.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, I've only done ketamine once, and it was a very low dose, and I would describe it as being half in, half out. So it's definitely something I need to do again. Okay. We're getting towards the end here. I have sort of two final questions on this for you. One is, people hear about bad trips all the time. And I have certainly had my fair share of absolute bliss, and I have been fucking rocked and have had to spend multiple weeks understanding the lesson and understanding how beautiful the information I was given was. I would love to know how you help people navigate a psychedelic experience, or what your advice is for beyond setting, dose, the matrix. Once you're in it, how do you use those psychonautic skills? Talk to us a little bit about that.
So without belaboring setting, dose, and the matrix, if those are accounted for,
let's assume they are.
Okay. Great. We're going to assume they are. I personally like to remember that everything is sacred. And that includes the horror, the life that's living and quivering there. And everything is always changing, right? To remember that everything is always changing. So if you are experiencing great levels of pain or difficulty, remember this isn't going to last forever. Nothing does. And just try to breathe with it. I also like to really look for any glimmer of light, any teeny tiny bit of light, teeny tiny bit. And with that, focus my attention there, and I can stay in the dark for a while. I also like to ask, ¿para qué? ¿Para qué? What is this for? What is this for? Have some more metacognition step in, what is this for? And by the way, everything that I just said is true for life without drugs. Yeah. If you're depressed, if you're anxious, if you're having a panic attack, if you're don't know how to stop doing something that you want desperately to stop, everything is sacred. Everything is always changing. Can I find some light here? And what's this for? Yeah, that's beautiful. I'll share two. I mean, obviously my experience is way more limited than yours, but I think as somebody new to this, relatively new to this, the big things for me have been if you see a demon, invited to have a coffee with you. Somebody said that to me, and it was amazing. And my first journey, of course, I saw a demon, and instead of being no, which I did for about 30 seconds, and then I remembered I had to
and invite the demon in. And I sure enough did. And the demon literally laid next to me the rest of the journey. And it was amazing.
I love him.
You would not love him if I told you who the demon was. It was super gnarly, but that's for another time.
What was it like for him to lay next to you?
He needed it probably more than I did. So it was.
Was it okay for you to have him there?
Yeah, it was. It was.
Okay.
There was something comforting about it, knowing that like, oh, it can't get worse than this. And the second thing that I'm reminded of a lot is SATA. I don't know if you've heard this acronym, but surrender, allow, trust, accept. That's also been a really big one for me as I've gone into these experiences. Final thing I have for you.
And I just want to thank you for bringing those two in. It's like you could put yourself in the demon's mouth, like put your head in it, like get in there. You're going to find that the demon is just a little mouse with a loudspeaker. If you hang out with him long enough, he's going to cuddle up next to you and take a nap like yours. And again, it's back to the courage, right? And are we getting like how can we bravely be with what is? And
totally
breathe there.
I remember a therapist a long time ago that I had. I was dealing with my health stuff. And this therapist was kind of like an OCD therapist. Because, I mean, really, health anxiety is sort of a form of that. And I remember this therapist saying, hey, if you're a kid and you're laying in a dark room in your bed and you think there's a monster under the bed, and every time you get scared, you turn the light on, you will never be able to sleep. But if you lay there and you say, you know what, monster, come fucking eat me. I dare you. Come fucking eat me. Please. In fact, please eat me. Please eat me. 5 minutes go by and you go, didn't get eaten. Lights didn't go on. Guess there isn't really a monster here. Right. And so I think that is something I've applied to my life, something I've applied to these experiences. And so, putting yourself in the head of the monster is super important. Who should do this and who shouldn't do this? Maybe more importantly.
I think people who have internal resourcing and a solid matrix and curiosity are good candidates, right? It's not just for clinical healing. It's for the state of humanity is one of low anxiety and maybe sometimes high, right? We are all pathological in some ways. And I'm not interested in diagnosing. I'm not. And I also think for those who are struggling with certain conditions, depression, anxiety, with a lot of very specific care, suicidality, eating disorders, addictions, psychedelics are some of the most effective interventions for addictive processes. These are really, really, really powerful ways to heal. And again, it can be for your own personal development, spiritual development, like optimization. And I sometimes don't like the word optimize, but what I want to optimize for is life and authenticity. Like I want people to sit up tall in their life force, connected to source. So I want that for as many people as is possible. And again, tending to like, do they have enough internal resourcing? Do they have a big enough backpack of skills to navigate these mystical spaces? And to kind of go back into the battlefields of their own and their ancestors.
How do you know, though? How do you know, like, if I'm somebody listening to this, I'm like, I don't fucking know if I have the backpack of
Don't do it alone.
Right.
Okay. Like this is a solo tripping is for some ninjas.
that's advanced hard mode. Okay.
Yeah, that's advanced. I would get yourself educated. And if you have a therapist that could support you, I mean, certainly with ketamine work, or, a friend who may be deeper along this path, it's not a clear path. And it's really important to listen to yourself. So do you feel called? I remember after my first ayahuasca experience, I really wanted my friend to go and sit with me. And he said, you keep calling me, but she's not calling me.
Yeah.
Right. So like, do you feel called? If you feel called, start doing some due diligence and research, like talk to people, like get get the information that you need to find the right space and place for you to consider diving in. And like I said, I think it's for a lot of people. Who is this not for? I mean, there's many physical health conditions which would make a person, not safe. And as well, in heart conditions, things like that, medicine specific. And then also if you or your family has a history of, psychiatric illness, these trips that never stop are sometimes are often for people who already have an inclination towards psychosis. There is research of which I am not leading or part of, where people are looking at psychedelic interventions for psychosis. And I think that's very interesting. But if you are a person who has that in your own personal history or family history, I would invite you not to participate unless you are like very well provided by like a super pro, a super researched, like well-trained professional.
Amazing.
Which I wouldn't put myself in that category.
Okay. I just thought of one more thing, and then I want to know where people can find you. What's the deal with MDMA? I mean, there's so much misinformation about MDMA and that it puts holes in your brain. And I know that's from like a very old bullshit study, and we've disproven that. But like MDMA is this amazing, amazing drug. And it's done wonders for me and my relationship. And is there any truth to that? Like, how careful should people be with this drug?
I'm not cavalier about any of it. MDMA is, generally speaking, a pretty safe medicine. Again, test your drugs. Like, things are not regulated, so there's cross contamination. And mind your setting and dose. I would say that it's a really beautiful medicine. It's also a therapy drug. It is a therapy drug. So if you're not in a certain space, you might encounter difficult content. Right? And the difficult content is coming up so that it can be worked with and through. And so, I mean, the psychedelic medicines at large, like, they're pretty safe. I mean, LSD, like, kind of can't kill someone.
Don't tempt me with a good time. No, I'm just kidding.
For a long, long, long time, but it's not going to kill you.
Yeah. Right. Lauren, you're just the greatest, and you're so full of wisdom. And, you are somebody that I'm sure we will be talking about in 20 to 30 years as somebody who was really on the front lines of this and pioneering a lot of amazing work. And so I'm grateful that you're having these kind of conversations as a therapist, as somebody who's putting, their business and livelihood on the line to advance something they believe in, is just unbelievable and should be so celebrated. Where do people find you? How can people work with you? Can they work with you?
Thank you for asking. So I do like to give people educational snacks on Instagram. So you can follow me there at lauren.taus, or on my therapy page, Embodied Life Therapy. My website, embodiedlife.com, has all of my offerings, and those include right now a training for clinical professionals, doctors, therapists, nurses, psychiatrists, et cetera, around how to work with psychedelic medicines and how to support integration. I also have a retreat coming up May 28th to June 3rd in Costa Rica at Holos. We will have 3 ceremonies with my favorite medicine, which we've already discussed. And I do have some spaces left there that is open for people who feel called and who feel like they want to take their lives to the next level. It's a meticulous and stunning space to hold deep transformation, transmutation in these sacred encounters. And I have also a group practice. So if you're looking for some one-on-one work, I do have a waiting list personally. And I do also have some really epic clinicians that work with me, and they have space too. So if you're looking for that, come reach out, and all the information's on my website. And thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. Unbelievable. This is one of my favorite conversations. I'm so stoked about the space. I'm stoked about you. Go on this retreat. Go check out Lauren's work. Her Instagram is amazing, amazing content. I can't believe it's free. I'm like constantly learning shit from you all the time in a minute and a half. And I love you. And may this journey and all your journeys continue to be full of amazing insight and love and all the things. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. So good. For drugs, like things are not regulated. So there's cross contamination, and mind your setting and dose. I would say that, it's a really beautiful medicine. It's also a therapy drug. It is a therapy drug. So if you're not in a certain space, you might encounter difficult content. Right? And the difficult content is coming up so that it can be worked with and through. And so, I mean, the psychedelic medicines at large, like they're pretty safe. I mean, LSD, like kind of can't kill someone.
Don't tempt me with a good time. No, I'm just kidding.
For a long, long, long time, but it's not going to kill you.
Yeah. Right. Lauren, you're just the greatest, and you're so full of wisdom. And, you are somebody that I'm sure we will be talking about in 20 to 30 years as somebody who was really on the front lines of this and pioneering a lot of amazing work. And so I'm grateful that you're having these kind of conversations as a therapist, as somebody who's putting, their business and livelihood on the line to advance something they believe in, is just unbelievable and should be so celebrated. Where do people find you? How can people work with you? Can they work with you?
Thank you for asking. So I do like to give people educational snacks on Instagram. So you can follow me there at lauren.taus, or on my therapy page, Embodied Life Therapy. My website, embodiedlife.com, has all of my offerings, and those include right now a training for clinical professionals, doctors, therapists, nurses, psychiatrists, et cetera, around how to work with psychedelic medicines and how to support integration. I also have a retreat coming up May 28th to June 3rd in Costa Rica at Holos. We will have 3 ceremonies with my favorite medicine, which we've already discussed. And I do have some spaces left there that is open for people who feel called and who feel like they want to take their lives to the next level. It's a meticulous and stunning space to hold deep transformation, transmutation in these sacred encounters. And I have also a group practice. So if you're looking for some one-on-one work, I do have a waiting list personally. And I do also have some really epic clinicians that work with me, and they have space too. So if you're looking for that, come reach out, and all the information's on my website. And thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. Unbelievable. This is one of my favorite conversations. I'm so stoked about the space. I'm stoked about you. Go on this retreat. Go check out Lauren's work. Her Instagram is amazing, amazing content. I can't believe it's free. I'm like constantly learning shit from you all the time in a minute and a half. And I love you. And may this journey and all your journeys continue to be full of amazing insight and love and all the things. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. So good.